All right, let's talk about roofing. So I've got my structure, it's not totally done. I still have some more finishing work to do on the outside of it, but I think it's ready for a roof. Your structure is ready for a roof when you're sort of done working on the inside. And that's true for both a model and like a larger building. Like you wouldn't want to put a roof on until you've got like all the detail work you want to do, especially around the top, done, because once you have a roof on, then you're working in cramped spaces. Now the caveat, of course, is if you're working outside, your structure's going to keep getting wet, maybe if it rains until you have a roof. So there's some different things to balance, but you want to do whatever you can when it's easiest to do. So for me, I'm kind of done with all the finicky stuff inside. Because this is just a model, I'm not going to add like a ton of details like decorative shelves or cob fireplaces or anything like that. So I'm not worried about that. So what I'm going to do for a roof is I'm going to mix up some more of my light clay. I got some sawdust and kind of watery clay. You might use grass instead of sawdust, as we described before. Or if you want to do this part with cob, if you don't want to mess with this whole light clay business, that'll also work just fine. It'll just mean the top of your structure is a little bit heavier, but it'll also be stronger, so there's a trade-off there. And the other thing I've gathered is my sticks. I think this was mentioned in one of the materials videos that you're going to need some sticks. I got some different kinds of stuff. This is like a fairly strong kind of dried piece of grass or reed. And then I've got some thicker sticks and some that have thinner parts. They can be a little flexible. I think it's pretty important that they're relatively well dried. Anytime you're working with green wood or sticks, it's going to tend to shrink and it might bend a little bit as it dries. So you got to watch out for that, especially in a large building. You don't want to do too much with green wood because it can change shape and size on you as it dries. So I'm going to mix up my light clay first. Then I'm going to wet down the whole top perimeter of my structure. And this is a little bit, you wouldn't necessarily do this. I think in a large building you would just try and, like I said, kind of complete everything. Like you would add on to stuff while it's still kind of damp. Like you'd never really let anything dry completely. Because like, especially in a really large structure, getting water back into like the middle of your walls to get them re-moistened is pretty much impossible. Cob soaks up a ton of water. It really takes a long time to distribute that water, and by the time you got the top of the wall wet, the middle of the wall might be kind of damp, and then you're risking structural problems and collapse. So it's really not done this way too much. I mean, if you have to, you add water to the top cob, but usually you just kind of try and keep up with the rate at which it's drying as you're adding on top. Alright, so now I'm going to take some of my sticks. I'm going to start with my thicker sticks. I'm going to lay some beams across the top. And you can go for different looks here, like a more, I don't know, Northern European kind of style. You might leave your beams ultimately like exposed, hanging off the ends, or if you want it more, I don't know, fitting in with a suburban look, maybe hide everything so it's all ultimately just covered in like some kind of colored plaster. I don't know. There's a lot of different ways you could do it. But I'm going to lay down a beam. I'm going to put some light clay. Oh, and I should mention, I'm kind of, the more I work with light clay, the more I'm realizing, at least in this small scale, that it's a highly variable building material. You can mix more or less clay, and I mean at some point you're basically just working with like adobe, which is like a lot of clay and some straw, but it gets to be more structural and less insulating the more clay you add. So for this I'm using a little more clay because I want it to be pretty strong. I mean the roof isn't going to be that heavy, but I wouldn't want it to like, fly off in a windstorm, if it was a real building. So I'm kind of trying to model that fact, make it a little stronger. Okay. And you know what? I'm realizing, I think probably what you would do, so you wouldn't just lay it on top. You'd make sure your new material is all the way under your beam so that it's fully encased in fresh material that's going to dry with it. So that doesn't, I think otherwise it might crack a little. Alright, so that being said, I just coat this all fresh material. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do, now that I've got my beams, or my roof joists, I guess you might say, laid, and they're laid lengthwise in the direction that water's going to run hopefully off my roof. I'm not sure that's critical, but I think it is typical. And then I'm going to lay my lighter weight roofing material across the top of that, and that is not going to be immediately plastered in. I'm just going to lay it across for now. This is going to be kind of tight together, and the reason for that is because I'm going to add on top of this more light clay. I'm going to mix up this like insulating layer for my ceiling. Of course, if I was doing this in scale, I would have been very careful to make sure these were all very level, but this tiny model with the sticks I'm working with. It's not really going to come out that level, but it's not that critical. Okay, I think that could work. Now I'm gonna, I gotta go give it some more sawdust, but I'm gonna mix up some more light clay. I'm gonna coat the whole top. See if I can put a layer on that doesn't fall through. I'll probably make it pretty light. All right, I've mixed up some more light clay, and I mixed it very light. Remember what that means is that there's more water and less clay. I watered down my clay mix a lot. And so when it dries, the water is all going to go away and there won't be a ton of clay left. So it's going to wind up being pretty light, pretty insulating. You can kind of feel, it has a different feel to it. It's a little more, I don't know, soupy. It's not as sticky. It feels a little lighter, spongier maybe. And this is again my light clay with sawdust. You might be working with grass. But it feels kind of similar, I think. And I'm going to just try and put a thin layer on the roof, if I can, without it falling through. I'm feeling like I might not have enough sticks on here for this to work, but we're going to find out. All right, that's finished. I put the white clay all over the top. There's one chunk that fell through, which I might try and fish out. Some sticks through the doorway. I don't know why I didn't make two doorways in this structure. It seems kind of a ridiculous oversight now that I'm looking at it. So maybe don't make that mistake, but yeah, it seemed like it worked pretty well. It's sealed all around, and I think that's like, I don't know, there's some debate in natural building about how well to seal your building up. Like a lot of buildings, conventional buildings have vents near the roof to let out moisture and excess heat, but I mean, a natural building, all these materials breathe so well, so it's kind of like a little bit more debatable how much you should seal around the roof. You know, some buildings have like an attic, which would trap some extra heat and moisture and give you a little bit more like options for ventilation if you left like, I don't know, vents in your attic. But I think I'm just gonna seal this up. If you wanted, one thing that's kind of neat that people sometimes incorporate in a natural building is like a kind of air circulation system through the ground. Like you could, if you're in a hot climate and you build a really big dense building with a lot of thermal mass to soak up a lot of energy during the day and cool off at night so it doesn't get so hot, you could put like a straw somewhere in the roof of your structure, and then what you do is you'd have like piping underground. There's a specific word for what that's called, but I forget. you'd have all this piping underground, and then you'd be sucking air through the ground up into your structure. It would cool it during the day. It's like a kind of passive air conditioning system. It's kind of popular. It doesn't really make a lot of sense in wet climates because the ground would just be damp and you're just sucking moisture into your building. But you could add some ventilation spots, even just like a straw that you could kind of open or close somehow. Might be a good idea. I just closed mine up, so I don't know what's going to happen. Yeah, so I'm going to let all this dry. I got my lamps back on, and yeah, I'll see you again when it's dry.